Hello, everyone. My name is Victor. I am the Occult Technician, and this is Mind War, Season 4, Episode 11.
Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War. Join the Mind War today. Enlist at patreon.com/mindwar. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to Mind War, folks. I appreciate you being here. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get started. Folks, we're going to pick up right where we left off in the book Far Journeys by Dr. Robert Monroe. We are on appendice number 2. And the reason that I wanted to go through these next few sections here is basically we have a bunch of doctors and scientists who are reviewing Dr. Monroe himself and his Gateway Experience program. They're kind of looking at it scientifically, and they created several reports. And what we're going to read is just a few sections from those reports. I thought it was pretty interesting to see with what professionals outside of the Monroe Institute thought of Dr. Monroe's work. So we're going to start with appendice number 2 called The Out-of-Body Psychophysiology of Robert Monroe. So these are doctors talking about Dr. Monroe himself, and it says this. Robert Monroe is a businessman from Virginia, now in his 60s, who is one of the most widely known gifted subjects of the out-of-body experience literature. He has written a book cataloging his out-of-body exploits and has founded a private institution devoted to the study of such phenomenon, the Monroe Institute of Applied Sciences in Faber, Virginia. He voluntarily submitted himself to in-depth psychiatric and psychological evaluation several years prior to the publication of this book. He underwent intensive psychiatric interviewing and a battery of different psychological tests. Monroe has never had psychiatric treatment of any form. He has performed at a high level of functioning throughout his career as producer, businessman, and entrepreneur. So it's very clear that the doctors that are talking about Dr. Monroe right now, they have studied him extensively, put him through all types of psychological tests, and they, again, describe him as a high-level functioning person throughout his career. So we know we're working with somebody who is very serious, right? A serious man with a serious mind. As we delve into his background, we find that he did not have out-of-body experiences until the age of 42. The reason that is so stands out to me is because that is the exact same age that I started my journey with the Gateway Experience and began having my first out-of-body experiences at the age of 42. He had an orthodox Southern upbringing with high-achieving and successful parents. Okay. So it says here about Dr. Monroe, it says the fascination with out-of-body travel seen in Monroe is likely an adult derivative of this Daedalus fantasy. So Daedalus is basically this idea of people wanting to fly, right? It's kind of an ancient story. Basically, there's so many different forms of it. Icarus with his wings that melted as they got too close to the sun. They were talking about that a little bit, and they're kind of saying Monroe's fascination with the out-of-body experience is his desire for flying. His childhood grandiose wish is transformed not only into out-of-body experiences as an adult, but also into the creation of an institute devoted to the study of these and other esoteric experiences. Hence, in Monroe, we see perhaps a more direct translation of the childhood wish to fly into an adult into an adult form of the grandiose wish. However, he has used his intent adaptively and productively rather than in a self-destructive or counterproductive way. It may be that this persistent grandiose wish to fly is more likely to be operative as a determinant in those subjects who have the esoteric variety of out-of-body experience, i.e., travels to distant locations and through other realms which are fantastic and inexplicable. This determinant may not apply to the more mundane experiences where one simply finds himself floating on the ceiling above his body. So again, I think what they're saying here is that this kind of childhood wish to fly, whatever that is deep down inside of probably all of us, some people use it and experience it in a more self-destructive and counterproductive ways, right? And we may see that with drug, alcohol abuse, and other types of acting out, which would be considered dangerous, right? But he says Monroe and other explorers like ourselves, we do it in a productive way. And one of the determinants of Monroe's out-of-body experiences is this persistent wish to escape the shackles of the earthbound physical form. What are some of the others? Okay, so are we all trying to escape the shackles of our earthbound physical form? In some ways, yes. I would agree with that statement personally. His history indicates that he was free from childhood trauma and in fact somewhat indulged with creature comforts. His mother, a dynamic and successful physician, had a certain outlook on life which tended to avoid ugliness and unpleasantness. This attribute also emerges in an analysis of Monroe's personality. Both Monroe and his mother used the defenses of denial and avoidance to a significant extent. These hypomanic defenses against aggression, tragedy, and destructiveness were further demonstrated in projective psychological testing. So this idea of using him and his mother using defenses of denial and avoidance of significant extent. And they were defending against aggression, tragedy, and destructiveness. They almost write about that in a bad way, but I agree with that, and I think that's a great way to live. You should be avoiding tragedy and destructiveness at all costs. You should be moving away from it and defending yourself against it. Isn't that part of survival, defending ourselves against the ugliness of life? Let's see. The Rorschach test indicated that Monroe was a man who avoids many aspects of his internal life. He has strong defenses against dealing with sexuality, defensive feelings, and especially aggression, all areas of his psyche that he prefers to keep out of his awareness. He has a pervasive tendency to avoid and detach himself from feelings, which shows itself in his patterns of thinking, his use of language, and thus interpersonal relations. He often simply steers off away and tangential to the way others think, feel, perceive, and express themselves. So maybe a little difficult. He may have some difficulty in communicating with others. He may have some difficulty in understanding his own personal feelings. I again agree with that. I kind of find myself in that same boat sometimes. And if you do too, guess what? That's what we're doing here. That's why we do this work. That's why the work that we do is so important. And in past podcasts, and I think it was maybe in the last episode, I may have been a little strong worded when I talked about people who may come against what we're doing here and find it to be, silly, it's fake, there's nothing to it. And they really, talk down about what we're doing here. Maybe even think of it as evil because of their religious or social or cultural belief systems, right? And I said that those people are without value, okay? And really what I meant with that is if they're coming against us and what we do here, but they haven't taken the opportunity to experience it themselves, then I'm sorry, but their opinion is in so many ways lacking in value. If you are too cowardly and too afraid to even listen to the tapes, especially with the enhancements of psilocybin and THC, I mean, it's a fork in the road, right? It's again like trying to have someone explain to us and tell us that they're an expert on what it means to swim, but they've never been in a pool before. I don't really want to hear your opinion because you have no idea what it means, right? And again, with what we're doing here, we are building our elite club, our first Earth battalion of mind warriors, citizen samurais, guerrilla gurus, and warrior monks. We are set aside. We are different. We are a different group and class of people. We are people who have experienced the gateway. And there's something special about that. And it's something that we should all be proud of and take very seriously. So appendice number 3, the out-of-body experience phenomenology. Descriptive data is presented from 339 subjects who reported out-of-body experiences in response to an advertisement. The data was analyzed according to pre-existing conditions, phenomenological features, and impact of the experience. Questions are raised about the etiology of the phenomenon and its meaning to the individual. So now what we're going to talk about over the next few pages is there were all sorts of different reports and questionnaires that were given to people, large groups of people, just to see if they've had an out-of-body experience at some point in their life or not. And if they have, they kind of describe what state of being that they were in when it occurred. And then also those who had it, they drill down more on deeper into what their experiences really were, and we're going to hear some of that here. It says the goal of our study is to address the following questions. Number 1, what is the continuum of phenomenological features, which is the out-of-body state? Number 2, how does it compare to certain other states of consciousness, such as dreaming, life-threatening experience, sensory deprivation states, and mystical religious experiences? Number 3, how does it relate to pathological states, for example, depersonalization, autoscopy, and psychosis? And number 4, what are the short and long-term effects on the individual, and what does the experience mean to him? And finally, number 5, what, if any, are the implications of this phenomena for the practice of psychiatry? So a lot of questions there they're trying to answer through these reports and their questionnaires. First, we start with the definition of the term out-of-body experience. For the purpose of our survey, we chose to define the experience in a very general way, since review of the literature clearly revealed that there is little, if any, agreement about what characterizes the state phenomenologically, physiologically, in terms of personality structure, or in terms of significance to the individual. We chose the following definition: an experience where you felt that your mind or awareness were separated from your physical body. That description right there, I think, is a perfect description of Focus 12. I think they don't go far enough with the description, but that is a description of Focus 12, where your awareness, your perception, your thinking is done outside of your physical brain, your mind is actually expanded outside of the physical, right? As with Palmer, we felt that the only theme in the literature which distinguishes these experiences is a sense of location, of the total sense of self at some place other than in the physical body. We did not feel that it was wise to restrict our definition further at this point until the experience had been more thoroughly studied. Such a definition, however, does reflect certain biases on our behalf. Explicitly, there are, number one, a belief that with the current state of knowledge, the subject is in a better position than the investigator to decide whether or not he had an out-of-body experience. That's right, folks. That's what I was just saying. No one can tell you whether you did or did not have an out-of-body experience after you've had one. Do not let anyone try to talk you out of what you've experienced or downplay what you've experienced, okay? If you are explaining to people in your life the experiences that you've had and they try to downplay them, they try to minimize them, then you need to really adjust how you communicate with those people, okay? Do not let them bring you down. Do not let them drag you down and make you think that what you experienced wasn't real. Number two, we wanted to emphasize the sense of location of self-awareness rather than the complex and extremely variable visual and auditory experiences reported in the anecdotal literature. Number three, whether or not there is objective laboratory demonstrations of the separation of self-awareness from its normal location in the brain seems not relevant to the study of the phenomenon from the psychiatric point of view. Okay, so again, number two, it is really, they just want to emphasize the sense of location, right? So really this idea that we, again, are thinking outside of our physical body. And that number three, there isn't really any type of laboratory testing or monitoring or measuring that can be done to quantify that you've actually left your body. But that's fine. They said that's not necessary in order to continue to gather this information and analyze it. Although some take the position, for example, that such a criterion should be fundamental to the experience, we feel it peripheral to an understanding of its psychological impact and its meaning to the individual, particularly in terms of its value structure and the organization and functioning of his ego. So again, it's more important, what they're studying here is the psychological impact it has on an individual, us, mind warriors, as we have these experiences. They're saying the psychological impact that it has is more important than, again, any type of, measuring tool that could be used scientifically to measure what this experience is, right? For now, we feel that the experience should be subjectively defined. However, we are very aware of the vast literature on perceptual illusion suggesting that such research is enormously subject to bias. For example, Ornay, one of the doctors, demonstrated that experimental results are directly affected by the experimenter's personal belief system. We've talked about that so many times. If you come into the Gateway Experience program with all sorts of cultural, religious, and societal dogmas, those cultural wet blankets that I like to call it, if you are covered in all of this dogma and it's been something that has stifled you your entire life and you still feel the guilt and shame and all of these things that come with these belief systems that are kind of forced on us because we're here in the West, right? Those things are going to maybe stifle your experience. Or when you do start to have experiences, you're going to be predetermined to view them as evil or scary or something to be afraid of. And that's just not true. That's why it's so important that when we go into the Gateway Experience, We do it with an open mind, an open heart, and we accept the experiences that occur and appreciate them for what they are. Stop trying to force them into, this category over here or this category over there through the lens of science or religion or whatever it may be. Just have the experience. Enjoy it for what it is. Learn from it. Learn the tools and become more powerful. The term out-of-body experience was coined by Tart, one of Monroe's companions, his colleagues there, in 1960, primarily to avoid the judgmental alternative names present in the literature which implied some non-existent exact knowledge of etiology of the experience. For example, such terms, now again, what they're saying here is they coined the term out-of-body experience instead of using terms like astral projection, ESP projection, doubling, astral travel, etc. Some writers feel that out-of-body experience is a specific form of depersonalization, a point to be addressed in the third paper of this series. Others, such as Ehrenwald, one of the doctors, emphasized not only the sense of separation, but also the visual accompaniments of what is seen by the self located outside of the body. So one of the terms that they wanted to avoid using was ESP projection, extrasensory perception. The reason I wanted to bring that up real quick, folks, is when I was in middle school, and for the very first time, we were told you can go to the library and choose your own books to write a report about. Now, this was so exciting for me, right? As a little kid, it was like all the other books that I'd ever read were ones that I was told you have to read these books as part of the curriculum. And now they said, go find a book on your own. And I chose two books. The first one was on the Secret Service. Very interesting topic, and I didn't know how much connection that they had to the financial world, but that I think had a lot of impact on me in my future career. But the next book that I chose was about ESP, extrasensory perception. So folks, this has been on my mind since I was just a young boy, a middle schooler, right? Learning on his own for the very first time. These were the books that I was attracted to even back then. This has been a lifelong journey. It's why it's called Far Journey, folks. Let's see. An adequate definition of out-of-body experience might include the following points. An altered state of consciousness in which the subject feels that his mind or self-awareness is separated from the physical body, and this self-awareness has a vivid and real sense about it, quite different from a dream. Again, a perfect example and definition of what Focus 12 is. That perception, that awareness, the thinking. We do it outside of the body. We do it outside of our own mind or outside of our brain. It feels like our mind, our thinking part of our mind, our consciousness has expanded outside of the physical body. And we know that it is quite different than a dream. We are consciously dreaming, okay? Very different. So let's see, we're going to go on to, the surveys about the out-of-body experience. Okay. A rather original approach to the study of out-of-body experiences was that of Shields, another doctor, who collected data on belief in out-of-body experiences from nearly 70 non-Western cultures. Okay, so earlier in the paragraphs preceding, they talk about all these different questionnaires in reports from Oxford and Stanford and stuff like that, where they were giving these questionnaires to students, hundreds at a time, asking them about their out-of-body experiences. But Dr. Shields here, he gives the same survey to nearly 70 non-Western cultures. And I thought this was interesting. It says, despite cultural differences, the beliefs were strikingly similar. Shields felt that this was indirect evidence for an account of a genuine event, the out-of-body experience. It is quite well known, for example, that many cultures attribute to shamans the capacity to fly out of the body. In fact, a shaman cannot be appointed as such unless he has that capacity. According to Iliad, such flights express intelligent understanding of secret things, metaphysical truths, symbolic meaning, transcendence, and freedom. Folks, when we get into future seasons of Mind War and we start talking about spirituality, the book that we're going to be reading through, which I'm not going to tell you what that is quite yet, it talks all about shamanism, this ability to fly, and all of these things here, right? This thought and this ability of flight, I know this sounds silly, but this is part of what the out-of-body experience is. Again, I talked about a dream I had as a child where I was running through the field in the house that was next to my house. And I just willed myself to fly. And sure enough, in that dream, I was flying. I see it crystal clear today. I can still feel it. It's a lot like when you are separating from the body, you kind of will yourself to fly. And that ability, again, is expressed by intelligent understanding of secret things. Occultism. It is why I am the occult technician. I am taking these secret things and I am breaking them down as a technician, learning them and trying to share them with you. This is occultism, folks. Metaphysical truths. Again, we are learning truths here. Symbolic meaning. Folks, everywhere on the screen right now, all throughout my art, it's all about symbolism. We've talked about it before. On my Patreon, I have a special episode up there called Guerrilla Marketing and Symbolism. It is what my artistic form is. It is symbolism. Transcendence, of course, transcending our physical body. Not only the physical, not only do we have to transcend our own issues of what it means to be a physical human being, but we are transcending, again, those cultural, religious, and societal wet blankets that are over top of us, those belief systems that keep us down. We have to transcend those. And when we do, like the book here says, we find freedom. That is what the mind war is about. Real freedom. Not the freedom that is talked about in politics and in the media today. Real individual freedom. We achieve it here in the mind war. It's why we fight every day. Anecdotal accounts exist from people already convinced of the veracity and validity of such experiences. All contain vivid and exciting descriptions based on the assumption that an objective separation and independent existence of mind from body is possible. Many of the reports are interested in what other dimensions of reality can be explored under these conditions. Eastman, another scientist, reported the first summary of conditions under which out-of-body experiences occur, for example, so this is when people have out-of-body experiences. This specific doctor, through his survey, said this: before, during, and after sleep. Of course, we know that all of this is associated with sleep. During hypnotic trance, okay, folks, we've talked about hypnosis is a huge part of the Gateway Experience tapes, and it plays an even larger part when we move into the spiritual practice. We stay hypnotized while we do our work. We stay in that trance state of mind, and then we do our spiritual work. During illness, drug states, and other shock or accident. So again, the illness and the shock or accident, those are kind of those near-death experiences where somebody is sick and they are, for the very first time in their life, maybe starting to think about death and what it really means, okay? In some ways, that's what started my journey. Again, I've talked to you so many times. I've been very open about my chronic illness. A few years ago, I was on death's door, folks. Not really. I wasn't that bad, but man, I was sick. I had lost a ton of weight. I hadn't eaten in a few weeks. I was in a really bad spot. I actually had to go to the emergency room at one point. And it really, once I got to that level of sickness, it really helped turn things around. It really put me on this journey, this far journey that we're on today, folks. And it helped me get into a place and in a state of mind where I said, I need to heal myself, healing the mind, body, and spirit. That's what we're doing here in the Mind War. And then, of course, the drug state. Again, I hate to say that, THC and psilocybin are drugs. When I think of drugs, I think of chemicals, man-made drugs. People try to categorize magic mushrooms and LSD. I think they're very far. They might be parallel to each other, but they're not the same thing, And I really like the focus that I do for, drug use. I like to call it enhancements, again, natural. I grew my own marijuana. I grew my own psilocybin mushrooms, right? I saw the process. My hands were in the dirt. I was planting the seeds. I was planting the spores and watching them grow. Okay, I could see it naturally occurring. There was no chemicals used in any of it. It was all organic. So I think of that very different than being in a drugged state. The sparse psychiatric literature provides elaborate frameworks to explain the experience based on, for example, psychoanalytical theories, which usually emphasize defenses against the imminence of physical death and various ways to deal with infantile omnipotence. Okay, I don't know what infantile omnipotence is, but again, like I just said, this idea of pending physical death, I'm sure that gets a lot of people thinking and maybe having these out-of-body experiences, right? Thus, the OBEs are often seen as unconscious attempts to portray aspects of man's eternal quest for immortality. Well, folks, in some ways, in the beginning of this art project, in the beginning of my spiritual work here, immortality played into it. My thought of what comes next and how can I ensure that I continue on after death, right? I think I have some interesting ideas of how that can occur and possibly may in the future. Literature from psychological and psychic sources, however, use the out-of-body experience to classify people as more or less spiritual, which usually means psychologically healthy and or with ESP ability based on the type and nature of their out-of-body experience. So again, now this is from literature, okay? This is from physiological and psychic sources of literature saying that people who have out-of-body experiences are classified as spiritual, who are psychologically healthy. That's correct. Oh, that's right. Your friend Victor here is psychologically healthy. I know so many people watching this who want to be doubters might think otherwise, but I think clearer and deeper than probably any person you've ever met. And we have ESP ability. Like I just said, folks, this has been a lifelong journey into the idea of extrasensory perception for me. So the next section is method. Okay, so on the out-of-body experience questionnaire, items relating to phenomenology were selected from the following sources: reports of near-death experiences, mystical religious literature describing transcendent states, philosophical, occult, psychic literature describing out-of-body experiences, psychoanalytical and psychiatric data describing states of depersonalization, psychotic, autoscopic, and hysterical dissociative states, and dreaming. Okay, so the phenomenology, so basically the categorizing of this phenomenon falls into the following kind of categories. We have the near-death experience. Okay, we've talked about that. Mystical religious literature describing transcendent states. Okay, we haven't touched on that very much throughout this book. Again, the Gateway Experience tapes, what we're learning here is the scientific way to learn magic. Okay, in future seasons, when we get into the spiritual side, we're going to learn the more mystical, religious ways of experiencing these same type of things, of learning magic, right? And again, we know that there are the two pillars, because we're working in twin pillars here. We have the scientific side where we are learning white magic through the Gateway Experience program. And then on the spiritual side, we will be learning black magic through ritual and other means. Okay, and we'll get there in future seasons. We have the philosophical, occult, psychic literature. Okay, so hidden philosophy. That's what we've been doing. That's what I've been doing for decades in my research that started basically right after September 11th, when I was still an active duty Marine, when my children were just knee high, and I was like, okay, we're about to go to war. I don't know anything about the world. I don't know anything about our enemies. I don't know any of this. I need to do deep dives. I followed every rabbit hole. And again, this was over 2 decades ago. I got an early start on what it means to be a conspiracy theorist, folks. And again, the goal was, what is hidden? What are these occult things, these secret societies? What are they trying to teach people? And that's what we're doing. We're breaking all that stuff down, and we're bringing those occult and hidden things out into the open. I am going to be here as long as I possibly can, explaining this to all of you. As long as they allow me on the airwaves to share with you the information that I found, I will continue to do so. Okay? And they're going to let me. They're going to let me finish this 7-year art project. I know I've ruffled some feathers so far, but I think that they understand that the work that I'm doing is more important than any of their kind of nonsensical, ways of stopping mis and disinformation and those type of things, right? What's it called when they, not shadow banning, but they're trying to, stifle the information that you're trying to get out there. Because one of the reasons I think they're going to allow me to continue this, and this is what I've learned from people, young men like myself, who joined secret societies and after several years left saying, they taught me nothing. There was nothing there. There was nothing of substance there. It was a men's club that was business oriented with a lot of silly rituals and memorization of long paragraphs of nonsense. When I looked into it, and folks, I've looked into it for years. I have met with several different men who were part of secret societies. I've, went to the pancake luncheon and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what this is, but this is not what I'm looking for. Okay. And that's what, again, led me to this place that I'm at today, doing the work and the research that we're doing here, okay? And so many of those men who came out and said there was nothing there, they left empty-handed. And then a few of them, like myself, we started to do the research on our own. I've definitely looked to some of those men as teachers, and I appreciate everything that they've taught, but even their content has come nowhere near the extensive this deep dive that we're doing into this work here. That's why it's going to take so long. That's why it's taking years to get this information out. And again, I appreciate you being here and thank you for your patience as we go through this. I want to be thorough and detailed, okay? And I want to get to some truths, some of those mystical truths, right? They also talk about psychoanalytical and psychiatric data describing the depersonalization. So we hear this idea of depersonalization quite a bit. There is a famous rapper, Post Malone, right? And he said that one day he did some drugs. He had this kind of out-of-body experience. He depersonalized, and I think he was talking about this on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he said, I've never kind of went back in my body. He says, ever since that drug-induced experience, I feel like I'm constantly watching my life instead of actually living it. That sounds scary. We don't want to do that. We're staying away from that, right? That's why we learn these things today. That's why we do these exercises all the time. We are training to fight against that type of depersonalization, right? Psychotic, autoscopic, and hysterical dissociative states. Again, we're not psychotic. We're not autoscopic. I don't even know what that means. And we are definitely not hysterical dissociative. We are hysterical right here, right now, very focused in our hysteria. And we are definitely not dreaming unconsciously. We dream consciously, folks. Most of the pundits of parapsychological literature recommend a physically relaxed state from their own personal experience. Out-of-body experiences occurring during dreaming is distinguished emphatically by subjects as being more real than a dream. In the majority of cases, flying and falling dreams, quite common in childhood, comprise a majority of the dreams occurring at the time of the out-of-body experience. It was of interest to us the certitude with which the subjects emphasize that they knew the difference between a dream state and an out-of-body state. Okay. The respondents, again, to the questionnaire, they're saying, we know that the out-of-body experience was something very different than dreaming. And they described it as being more real than a dream. And folks, for those of you that are following along, those of you that are participating, because remember I said this is going to be a participatory podcast. From the beginning of Mind War Season 3, where we first started the Gateway Experience program, for the next year or two, this is all about participating, right? You should be participating in this along with all the rest of us. Hey, we're here doing the work, and you should be too. And when you do, you're going to realize that the experiences that you're having are more than just a dream. It says here, the use of drugs and alcohol had a low incidence in the population. So of the questionnaires, there was a very low group of people, a small number of people who actually were on drugs or alcohol at the time of their out-of-body experience. And it says a study of marijuana users showed that 44% of marijuana users had at least one out-of-body experience. All right, where are my stoners at? Okay, a fellow stoner. I've been smoking weed since I was about 12 years old, folks. It says 44% of us marijuana users have had at least one out-of-body experience. Again, if you're not quite ready to add the enhancements of psilocybin, aka the magic mushrooms, to your gateway experience, use the marijuana. If you're already a marijuana user, I mean, I'm sure you're already doing it. The edibles, I usually, right before I start listening to the tapes, I listened to the tapes last night. I first ingested my psilocybin. It took about an hour for it to start to kick in. When it did, I went and smoked marijuana flower. Then I went and listened to the tapes. I listened to one tape. I woke up. I drank some water. I hit the THC vape pen and then listened to the next tape. So THC is also, a huge part of my experiences with the tapes, right? It also says our population is a lot older, the mean age of 45. That's exactly how old I am right now, folks. It's interesting. In culture, we call it a midlife crisis. I'm fairly certain that's what I've been going through. I hate the word crisis. That's silly. I'm not having a crisis. It's more of just reviewing the first half of your life, kind of stepping out of the rat race. Now that things have calmed down with my career and family and stuff like that, I've been able to kind of settle, partially semi-retire, right? And that has allowed me to really just kind of look back on my life, kind of deal with some of the traumatic issues that may have happened, understand them, and learn and grow from them, right? But not, society in the West, we call it a midlife crisis. That's gross. Again, we put this demeaning kind of medical term to it. It used to be called the hero's journey, right? That's what it is. We are heroes. We are fighting through all of these things that come against us in our lives, right? In all different forms. That's the mind war. So we had the hero's journey. We have the dark night of the soul. Again, exploring the darkness, exploring the void. That's the abyss. We live there in the Gateway Experience program. That is our starting point, is the darkness. Okay. So again, this for me, again, middle-aged, just like we're talking about here from the book, my hope and my wish is that the things that I'm trying to share with you here can be shared with people who are much younger. I think children should be learning the Gateway Experience program. I think children should be taught these things at an early age, right? Not only the tools that we learn through the Gateway Experience tapes, but also all of the things that we've talked about here, that we talk about here in the Mind War, the esoteric stories and how we break them down into reality. I really would love to see that younger people, because again, I tell you folks all the time, especially in my Mind War Patreon, I say, I'm sharing with you all the things I wish I knew when I was young. Let's see. It says the drugs reported used by our subjects were not classifiable, ranging from anti-hypertensives through vitamin pills and antibiotics. Only 4 subjects reporting using psychedelic drugs, LSD and marijuana, at the time of the experience. I haven't done LSD or acid, I think, since I was a teenager was the last time. I did it about 5 or 6 times, maybe up to 10 times. Had some very intense experiences, very eye-opening. I definitely enjoyed my mushroom trips as a teenager more. Those had a more impact on me. The LSD was almost more recreational, just have fun and just kind of like have some type of experience besides sitting around being bored, but the mushrooms were much more meaningful. A question was asked to explore by the individual wanted to have an out-of-body experience and revealed some interesting findings. Of the 91 classified responses, 20% of people who wanted to have an out-of-body experience were simply interested in the curiosity or fun. I love that. If you're a curious person especially one who revels in fun. I like that. I want to be your friend. That's a good thing. Okay. 23% were members of a psychic research or psychic research or study group. I would also like to be friends with you and be part of your study group. 25% were involved in personal existential explorations associated with major developmental stages. That midlife crisis I was talking about, or as like I said, the hero's journey or the dark night of the soul, right? And 30% of the experience was entirely spontaneous and unexpected. Again, those kind of near-death experiences. And only 10% of the sample had previously attended workshops on out-of-body experiences, and it was significant that approximately 1/3 of the sample had not expected in any way to have such an experience and did not admit at least to expecting or even knowing about such experiences. So only 10% really kind of sought it out and had training for it, so that was interesting. But then it says 1/3 really just either didn't know what an out-of-body experience was or never expected to have one. So I'm sure it was shocking and exciting for them. So next section is nature of the experience. It says Table 2 summarizes a number of phenomenological features of the experience. The first 6 features, occurring in more than 50% of the subjects, do not show the more esoteric aspects described in the literature, but describe a simple subjective perceptual experience of great vividness and reality, showing not only a sense of separation of the total self from its normal location in the head, but also being aware that this self exists in the same environment as the physical body, which can be clearly seen and is associated with the feeling of unusual energy and a desire to return to the body. That entire paragraph was one sentence, and what they are saying here is that 50% of the subjects realized that there was a separation of the total self from the physical. They realized, okay, we are more than our physical body because we are more than physical matter. As might be expected, some of the more vivid and detailed phenomenological features were overrepresented in the top 25% of the sample. For example, using independent groups, the following features were more common in the top 25%. Okay, so these features were a sense of energy, noises, particularly roaring noises. You're going to hear that. Again, the roaring of the waves, the roaring of the spaceship. Again, it sounds like you're in an airplane or a spaceship and it kind of roars as it takes off, right? So many of them were seeing the body from the distance, a sense of being able to pass through objects, awareness of the presence of non-physical beings, again, those spirit bodies, the other spirits that are out there that we can work with, and seeing a brilliant light. I've talked so much about the white light with the kind of fractal colored shapes that move through it. It is an integral part of the gateway experience. You're going to see it. You're going to feel it. These findings show some differences from the major surveys reported in the literature. For example, Krockall, one of the doctors, says in an analysis of anecdotal reports from 380 subjects, found a high representation of people who felt connected to their bodies by a cord, who see their apparitions, who see other apparitions during the experiences, and who demonstrate ESP during the experience, none of which were significantly represented in our population. Again, feeling like you're connected by a cord. When you first start to have your out-of-body experience and you're floating just a few feet above your body, you're going to feel a physical connection from your spirit body brain to your physical body brain. Again, it's not quite here. It starts around here somewhere. Very strange. But you feel that connection. And that connected cord, almost like an umbilical cord, like a spiritual umbilical cord, it's very comforting, especially when you have your first experience out of the body. There's no fear that you're going to float away because you feel that connection. Eventually, that cord, the tension on the cord becomes very tight and it gets cut. And that's when we really fly away. However, some of the major findings, for example, the subject being able to see his own body from a new and spatially independent vantage point, finding himself in a form similar to his physical body, and feeling the other body tends to float, were supported in our study. Our findings correspond more closely with those of Celia Green, another doctor, who found that particularly none of her correspondents saw a cord. So that doctor, she didn't quite get the same info. Okay, in the next section here, it says impact of the experience. As seen in Table 3, a majority of the subjects had remarkably positive experiences. That's right. What is striking is the use of superlative adjectives in the reports. By no means was this experience ordinary, and in 60% of the sample was life-changing. Even those who experienced the out-of-body experience as extremely frightening or giving sensations of great power. Okay, so again, the majority of subjects found that this experience was life-changing. Even those people who found it to be frightening, and they describe it as giving a sensations of great power. It's a beautiful feeling, folks. It's a conscious feeling of the power within us. You'll understand it when you experience it. And 85% of the respondents termed the experience as a very pleasant experience. Okay. 85% said it was a pleasant experience. There's nothing to be afraid of. Take the first step. The test revealed, as would be expected, that those who were in a state of mental calmness at the time of the out-of-body experience experienced more positive moods both during and after the experience. Mood states such as joy, freedom, calm, peace, and quiet were experienced much more frequently than those who had feelings of fear during the experience. The majority of the people describe their experience with words such as joy, freedom, calm, peace, and quiet. That was a perfect description of my experience with the 2 tapes that I listened to last night. We'll talk about those more soon. But it was definitely deep, deep sense of calm, relaxation, peace, and quiet. Some of the test comparisons also revealed the fact that those who were mentally calm had more detailed and vivid experiences than those who experienced fear at the time of the out-of-body experience. For example, they had senses of energy, vibrations, feelings that people not out of the body were aware of their presence. Okay. It says, in the mentally calm group, the experience was seen as having a more lasting and dramatic impact on life. For example, it was described as a spiritual or religious experience, an experience of great beauty and lasting belief, and affected a change toward a belief in survival after death. What we're talking about here, We've talked about it before. If you are a religious person and you've went your entire life hearing about what it means to be religious and understand maybe what God is or what it might be like to go to heaven or whatever, the people that described those experiences thousands of years ago and wrote it down in a book that you're still reading today, they had the exact same experiences that we do when we listen to the Gateway tapes, okay? That's what we're learning. That's what we're doing. We are having a spiritual or religious experience. Again, you religious people out there, put the book down and put the headphones on. An experience of great beauty and lasting belief. Lasting benefit, These are beautiful experiences. They may be some of those beautiful experiences you've ever had in your life, and there is lasting benefit to it. I do this work every 2 weeks. And throughout that 2-week period, the feelings of joy and calmness, it follows with me throughout the 2 weeks. Earlier, I mentioned taking mushrooms, magic mushrooms as a teenager. And I remember being, depressed as a teenager at times. I would take the magic mushrooms, and for 3 months afterwards, I would feel amazing, uplifted. And now, through this work, I try to, I maintain that level of uplifted feeling, that lasting benefit. And it has affected a change toward a belief in survival after death. Again, that idea of our soul leaving the body after we die and going to some place called heaven. The data is quite reminiscent of the categories used to describe peak and plateau experiences and mystical religious experiences. For example, the sense of unity, transcendence of time and space, sense of objectivity and reality, a noetic and sacred quality, a deep positive mood state, and a quality of ineffability, a sense of unity. I think when you have these experiences, especially when you have them with the enhancements of psilocybin and THC, you start to understand that unity of the human species. Again, this idea of where we all came from the same place and we all will return to the same place, that we all are truly one. Subjects who described a sense of purpose to the experience in general indicated that the experience enabled them to obtain closure on some of the major existential questions. For instance, to show me that everything is possible, to show me new possibilities and realities. We talk about how many of the tapes, Dr. Monroe starts out with saying, remember your purpose for this tape. That's exactly true. I've told you before that if you are a young person and you are trying to figure out what your purpose in life is, stop looking externally. Look inwards. You're going to send your question into the universe and the answer will come from within, okay? And you're going to find your purpose. And you're going to obtain closure, meaning you're going to find your purpose and you're going to receive the answers to some of the most important questions, which are to show me that everything is possible. Through manifestation, everything is possible. You can be whoever you want to be and do whatever you want to do. And to show me that new possibilities or realities. That's what we're talking about. That's what the mind war is. All the way from season 1, when we talk about changing our aristos, changing the scenario in our life, even just minutely, day to day. When we change our scenario, we can change our situation, which approves our aristos, our current state of being, where we are and what we're doing. It shows us that there are new possibilities. Because again, we get bogged down with the drama of survival in our current world, whatever that might mean to you. Again, we're not surviving against wild animals, hunting and gathering, growing our own food, not that type of survival. But instead, we're going to work every day to pay the bills, to get the next thing, whatever it might be. We can see that there are new possibilities. There's new avenues that we can break free from those things and find a different path. These accounts reflected a preordinance of subjects who were dealing with issues associated with major life changes and requiring much introspection, review, and assessment of personal strengths and weaknesses. Again, we're doing that deep dive. We are looking internally instead of looking externally for the answers. We are turning to ourselves for the answer instead of turning to others. Because I don't care who gives you the answer about what to do next. There's going to be some type of personal reason why they're doing that. There's going to be some benefit to them with the advice that they give you, okay? No one else in this world knows what's better for you than you. Start trusting yourself. Find the answer within. That's where it lies. All right, this final piece here. As one reviews our results as an attempt to delineate the phenomenology of the out-of-body experience, this study adds a number of major features to the understanding of the experience. An old theosophical tract used the concept of thought form. In the general case of out-of-body experience is a typical thought form, the question really being, what form does this thinking take? We have elected not to address the issue of whether mind really separates from the physical body, but our research has raised in our minds fundamental questions about the nature of what is really real. Really real, folks. We have scientists, very thoughtful, well-educated scientists who have reviewed the information from people who have gone through the Gateway Experience program, and the fundamental data that they've pulled from that has had these scientists even start to question what is really real. In addition to the sense of separation of mind from body, what becomes apparent from the survey is that total mind, perhaps best referred to as sense of whole self, is separated. They're saying that through this information, that it has become apparent to, again, well-educated scientists that the sense of the whole self is separated from the physical body. There is visually no self-awareness in the body. The whole self, including observing and experiencing ego functions, is located at a point in perception space other than the brain, with the physical body being seen as inert and thoughtless. This is again that kind of avatar type idea that we heard in the story where Dr. Monroe was visiting his spirit friends in the future Earth, where their physical bodies were just stored here on Earth, And when they wanted to experience being human, they would simply go back into the thoughtless avatar body. There is no clouding of consciousness as is reported in hypnagogic, hypnopompic, and dream, included lucid dreaming states. In fact, consciousness is felt to be quite clear. So again, in these other states, the hypnagogic state, the dream state, including lucid dreaming, there is often a cloudiness where you're kind of, you're unable to really focus, but that's not what happens with the Gateway program. We see these things in 4K. And Dr. Monroe teaches us to remember the things that we've learned and felt and seen so that we can share it with others. The most striking finding reported by subjects is the absolute certainty that they were not dreaming, whether or not the experience occurred when quite aroused, for example, when in severe pain, or, as in the majority of cases, in a resting state. So again, there's certainty there that they are not dreaming. In the final piece here from the book Far Journeys by Dr. Monroe, we read this. In the Republic, Plato delineates 4 levels of experiential reality. We have imaginary, physical, conceptual, and direct transcendental cognition, which he calls direct seeing or the good. In the story of from the Republic, the story is told of a valiant man named who died in battle and who later revived and told a story whereby his soul had departed from him. Again, the Republic was written in the year 600. Plato claims something utterly alien to the modern mentality. He says that only after death, when we are free from bodily influence, shall we know the whole crux of being. Plato feels that freeing the psyche from the body is an essential condition for the philosophic journey to ultimate wisdom. As indicated by Grasso, monistic materialism has collapsed the architecture of being to a one-level affair. The really real world, a sense of experience. The middle kingdom, the unreal domain of dreams. The flimsiest form of epiphenomenon. Perhaps the collective asylum of artists and the mad. They may teach us to be less dogmatic in the way we toss about epitaphs like real. That's right, folks. The mind warriors, the citizen samurais, the guerrilla gurus, the warrior monks, the asylum of artists and the mad, we will be turned to in the future to understand what is really real. Folks, that was Far Journeys by Dr. Robert Monroe, his second book in his 3-book trilogy. What a wild journey it has been. I am so excited that we made it through. And we are going to be doing a deep dive into Wave 4 Adventure, Tape 5, Nonverbal Communication 2, after a word from our sponsor. Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War. Welcome back, folks. We're going to do a deep dive into Wave 4 Adventure, Tape 5, Nonverbal Communication 2. I listened to this tape last night with the psilocybin enhancements of a strain called Blue Meanies. So this, again, a very intense strain of magic mushrooms. It really... It's going to be difficult to kind of describe what I felt. It was not anything like the feelings that we've had in past tapes, again, where we explore creating our spirit body or moving in 3 dimensions once we've created our spirit body. There wasn't as many visuals as we've talked about in some of the past tapes, again, where you're visualizing yourself creating your energy toolbar, you're receiving nonverbal communications, right? This was, again, very difficult to describe. It felt very intense. It felt wonderful, but it was more about when I came out of all of this, because I listened to 2 tapes last night, and when I came out, I just simply had a sense of calm and peace about me. And I'm going to read through the tape and I'll try my best to describe what was occurring, but really in the end, it was just the state of being that these tapes and this experience left me in, which is the most important. A level of calmness, a level of peace and tranquility that has been just elevated. I feel better today. Like in my notes that I wrote last night, I basically just wrote, I feel good. And that's not a bad place to be. So Dr. Monroe starts Wave 4, Tape 5 by saying, now in Focus 10, here is your next exercise in nonverbal communication, the eternal language of the universe. Translate these words and phrases into non-thought or non-word thoughts. When I say on, begin the translations. When I say off, release the thought. Okay, so again, I don't want to ruin all these words. I don't want to go through all of them, but one of them here is, he says, a soaring bird. So as soon as he says soaring bird, and then he says the word on, in my mind, all of a sudden there I was, as a bird, soaring through the skies. But it wasn't in past, kind of visual experiences I've had where it kind of felt 3D. This was more like there was a movie screen up here. It's like I was looking upwards to see the movie. And the movie was almost a third-person view, like I was just kind of looking over the top of the head of the bird as it was soaring around. It wasn't super clear. There wasn't a whole lot of feeling of flight. It was just kind of almost, again, watching it on a screen that was above me. And that was a lot of what the visuals that I received. There was one about a horse. And for that, I visualized my children. They love riding horses. So I saw them, as they are today, riding on a horse out in the field. Again, a great visual. It was very comforting, loving for me to see them that way. And again, just an important part of the practice of visualization. But the next part, he goes from having you think of these type of things, again, like a bird or a horse, and then he just out of nowhere just says the word relax, and then he says on. And when he did that, again, we're only in Focus 10. So you're very clearly and conscious to the fact that you are still centered in your physical body. There is no expansion out of the body yet. You know you're in there. You're in the sleep dojo. We've talked about that extensively, right? But when he says relax, I'm telling you, if there was a video camera in my room last night watching, I almost guaranteed that I was levitating off the bed. It wasn't the feeling of my spirit body being created and leaving my body. It literally just felt like my physical body was levitating off the bed. I almost could feel myself lifting off, right? It felt amazing. Again, these are all peaceful feelings. They're pain-free. It was so much fun. And again, it wasn't something that I was expecting from a tape like this, right? So then he goes on and he says several more words that are descriptive of our thought processes and our states of being. I'm going to leave those for you. Then he goes through our affirmation and he kind of reads through the affirmation. And as he does, he says on and off. Now, what was interesting is, again, the psilocybin enhancements, I think, were intense enough last night that I was hearing Dr. Monroe and I was trying to follow along with him, but in some ways it was almost like I couldn't even follow along, right? And again, that's where this difficulty in describing what I was experiencing, right? It's, I don't want to say it's like being drunk where you kind of forget about what happened or whatever, but there was just this sense of just having the experience, just being in it, I guess is the best way. I just was having it and accepting it and enjoying it for what it was. And I was catching myself trying to think of words while I was having the experience to share with you. And when I did, it would distract me and I would say, okay, stop worrying about the show tomorrow. Just have the experience. And I kept doing that. And again, the result was just coming out of these tapes with a sense of calmness, peace, and tranquility that has just been leveled up, right? So after Monroe goes through the affirmation, doing the on and off thing here, he says, now move to focus 12 and then just experience. Allow yourself to gather any information that comes to you and translate it however you need to, right? So in the focus 12, what was interesting, again, that was just a feeling of expansion. I wasn't verbally receiving information, visually receiving information. It was more of a deep inner sense of calm just began to bubble up. Calm and peace and tranquility. It was very nice. But I do want to say this. So in the Focus 10 state, one of the things that was kind of interesting, because again, you're in your physical body, right? My head was laying straight, just like I'm seeing you now. But what kind of, I don't want to say alerted me, but was a little strange was that my perception was starting to change. So in my mind, it felt like my head was like this, okay? I felt like I was looking in that direction. But my physical body was this way. I knew that the physical body was this way, but my perception was looking that way. And there was, again, there's no fear here in the mind war, but there was a little worry of like, hey, doc, are you going to put me back in the right setting here so I can see through my eyes again? Because I don't want to go through the rest of my life looking up in the to the right, okay? So that was a little strange. That was kind of the feeling that went on. And then also, I wanted to make note of this. I think this is important. So yesterday was, as of this recording, yesterday was Labor Day, right? And so I went to a function, a party, I guess, right? At my parents' house. Family, neighborhood friends were there. It was wonderful. It was a great setting, great food. We played games, cornhole, and all that kind of stuff, right? And it was really nice. A lot of great conversations, okay? But one of the things that I found, and you folks might have this same type of issue, is that when you go out and you have a lot of interaction with people, okay, throughout most of my days now, I don't interact with people face to face. So when I do go and visit people like this, it doesn't happen that often. So when I did, there's a lot of input, right? And it really imprints on my mind. And so then when I go to lay down and close my eyes, I'm visualizing the conversations that I've had, right? I feel the presence and essence of people. I see the conversations clear as day. And I think this is, again, part of this practice of imagination that we're doing here. I think that helps in creating clearer memories as we just live our lives. And so that was sort of a distraction during the first tape. Again, like I said, I was kind of having trouble following along with Dr. Monroe because I was reliving the conversations that I had just had a few hours prior. And I caught myself multiple times kind of visualizing the scene, seeing and hearing the conversation, and I would catch myself and say, okay, take this, put it in the energy conversion box, close the lid, right? And I had to do that a couple of times and kind of recenter and refocus on the tape. So again, maybe there was some lack of focus on my part. But again, ultimately, the feeling that I received, that I walked away from with this tape, was simply a feeling of just calmness, tranquility. I feel good. I'm excited. I don't know that there's more to take from this tape than that. And it's something that I appreciate. You know, it isn't, I don't have fanciful, imagery like we did in the last couple of episodes. We didn't deal with past traumas. We didn't create new tools or anything like that. I really just walked away with a sense of calm and tranquility. And that was Wave 4 Adventure, Tape 5, Nonverbal Communication 2. I appreciate you being here, folks. And as always, remember, harden your hearts and open your minds, because this is Mind War.